Tony Stein crouches behind a low rise of black volcanic sand at 9:02 in the morning on February 19th, 1945, and the beach in front of him is already coming apart. He is 23 years old, a corporal from Dayton, Ohio, and slung across his chest is a weapon nobody in the United States Marine Corps ever issued him. It is a modified Browning aircraft machine gun, stripped from the belly of a wrecked fighter plane and rebuilt by hand, fitted with the buttstock of an M1 Garand and the bipod of a Browning automatic rifle. He calls it the Stinger. Around him, Company A of the 1st Battalion, 28th Marines, 5th Marine Division is trying to find its footing on Green Beach 1 at the base of Mount Suribachi, and the volcanic ash swallows their boots up to the ankle with every step. Stein is the first man of his unit to reach position after hitting the sand. He plants his feet, raises the Stinger, and opens fire, laying down a curtain of covering round so the rest of his platoon can move. The gun spits at a rate no Marine on that beach has felt before, closer to 1,500 rounds a minute than the 400 of a standard-issue water-cooled .30 caliber. Within minutes, Japanese machine guns and mortars pin his platoon flat against the sand. Stein does something that defies basic infantry logic. He stands straight up, in full view of the enemy, and lets them shoot at him, just so he can see where the fire is coming from. The smell on that beach is sulfur, rising from vents in the volcanic rock itself, mixed with cordite and the diesel exhaust of landing craft still grinding up onto the sand behind him. The noise never stops, the metallic clatter of amphibious tractors, mortar rounds landing in clusters of 3 and 4, and underneath it all the high, snapping rattle of the Stinger, a sound unlike any other weapon on that beach that day. That single act, 7 months before his 24th birthday, would end with 20 enemy soldiers dead by his hand alone, 8 solo trips back to the waterline for ammunition, wounded Marines carried out on his shoulders, and a name added to a very short list of Americans who ever fought a battle carrying a machine gun they built with their own hands. Iwo Jima was 8 square miles of sulfur-stinking volcanic rock, 750 miles south of Tokyo, and by February 1945, it had become the most valuable piece of real estate in the Pacific War. B-29 bombers flying out of the Mariana Islands to strike Japan passed almost directly over the island, roughly 660 nautical miles from Tokyo, and Japanese fighters based on its 2 airfields could scramble to intercept them before they ever reached their targets. American commanders wanted the island as a fighter base and an emergency landing strip for crippled bombers. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi understood exactly what was coming, and instead of trying to stop the Marines on the beaches, he built a fortress underground. Japanese engineers dug more than 11 miles of tunnels through the soft, volcanic rock, connecting some 1,500 bunkers, pillboxes, and gun emplacements. Kuribayashi had roughly 21,000 men dug into that rock, under strict orders to kill 10 Americans before dying. The Marine Corps sent 3 full divisions to take the island, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Marine Divisions, nearly 70,000 men in total, the largest all-Marine force ever assembled for a single operation. Naval and aerial bombardment had pounded Iwo Jima for 72 straight days before the landing, and on the morning of the assault itself, battleships and cruisers added 3 more hours of point-blank shelling. None of it broke Kuribayashi's tunnels. When the first wave of amphibious tractors ground up onto the black sand at H hour, 9:02 a.m. on February 19th, the island was eerily quiet. The Japanese were under orders to hold their fire until the beach was packed with men and equipment. Stein's unit, the 28th Marines, had one specific job among the 70,000: cross the narrowest part of the island, cut Suribachi off from the rest of the Japanese defences, and then take the mountain itself. The quiet did not last. Once several thousand Marines and their vehicles jammed the 800 yards of beach at the island's southern tip, Kuribayashi's gunners opened up from positions the naval bombardment had never touched. Mortar rounds fell at a rate Marine veterans of Tarawa and Saipan said they had never experienced, and the soft volcanic sand made digging a foxhole nearly impossible, since the walls simply collapsed back in on themselves. It was into this beach that Tony Stein and the Stinger arrived. Stein had been part of the small team that built the weapon months earlier, working alongside Sergeant Mel Grevich of the 5th Marine Division, who had the original idea of stripping an ANM-2 aircraft machine gun out of a downed or scrapped fighter and converting it into a portable ground weapon. Only 6 Stingers were ever built. Stein, a trained tool and die maker from a machine shop at Dayton's Patterson Field before the war, helped Grevich's team modify the guns, and as a reward he was the only Marine outside Grevich's own unit issued one to carry into combat. Once his platoon reached the base of Suribachi, the fighting turned into a house-to-house battle fought through concrete and rock instead of city streets. Japanese pillboxes covered every approach with interlocking fields of fire, so that any Marine who neutralized one position would immediately draw fire from 2 or 3 others. Stein began working these positions alone. He charged one pillbox at a time, closing the distance while the Stinger's high rate of fire kept Japanese gunners from raising their heads. Because the weapon burned through ammunition so fast, Stein emptied magazine after magazine in seconds rather than the extended bursts a standard machine gunner could manage. That created a second problem: resupply. Over the course of February 19th, Stein made 8 separate trips back down to the beach to restock ammunition, sprinting across open ground that Japanese gunners on the high ground of Suribachi could see the entire way. At some point during the fighting, he discarded his boots entirely, moving faster barefoot across the volcanic sand to shave seconds off each exposed run. On several of those 8 trips back to the beach, he carried wounded Marines with him, using the return trip for ammunition as a second mission to pull casualties out of the kill zone. The contrast between Stein's actions and the broader chaos on the beach that day tells you what one man with the right tool could do inside a battle that, for most Marines, felt utterly beyond individual control. Along the rest of the 5th Marine Division's front, men were pinned down for hours, unable to advance more than a few yards without drawing mortar fire. War correspondents who came ashore that afternoon described stepping over bodies simply to find cover. Navy corpsmen worked through the surf under fire, some of them killed while dragging wounded Marines to boats that would take them to hospital ships anchored offshore. For the Japanese defenders inside Suribachi's tunnel network, the day looked entirely different. Many had been ordered to remain silent and hidden in prepared positions until Marines were close enough to guarantee a kill, which meant enduring hours of naval bombardment in cramped, sulfur-fumed tunnels before firing a single shot. Some tunnel complexes had no ventilation at all, and Japanese soldiers reported temperatures inside reaching well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit from the volcanic heat beneath the island's surface. 7,000 miles away, American and British armies were still fighting toward the Rhine in a war that looked almost nothing like the one on Iwo Jima. In Europe, German towns often surrendered once resistance turned hopeless, and prisoners came in by the tens of thousands. On Iwo Jima, surrender was rarely an option Japanese soldiers were permitted to consider. Kuribayashi's standing order was to kill 10 Americans for every defender who died, and of his roughly 21,000 men, fewer than 200 were ultimately taken alive. That contrast shaped Marine tactics on the island, including the decision to let a corporal like Stein clear pillboxes one at a time, rather than trust that any bypassed position would stay quiet. If this kind of deep dive into World War II history interests you, a quick subscribe helps more than you might think. By the time the light started to fail on February 19th, Stein's platoon had advanced only a few hundred yards inland, a distance that would have taken minutes to walk on any ordinary day. Twice during the fighting, the Stinger was shot directly out of Stein's hands by Japanese fire, and twice he picked the weapon up, checked it, and kept firing. Ammunition discipline broke down across the whole beachhead, as units that had planned for one rate of consumption found themselves burning through supplies far faster, especially for a non-standard weapon like the Stinger that had no official supply chain at all. Every round Stein fired had to be scavenged or hand-carried up from the beach dumps by Marines improvising on the spot. As dusk approached, Japanese defenders began a series of infiltration attempts, trying to slip through gaps in the American lines under cover of darkness. Stein's actions that afternoon had helped clear a path for his company to reach a defensible position before nightfall, and at the end of the day, when his unit needed to pull back to a more secure line, Stein covered their withdrawal personally, laying down fire from the Stinger as the rest of his platoon fell back to the company position. In the days that followed, the tactical lessons Stein had demonstrated alone spread across the southern end of the island. Marine engineers brought forward Sherman tanks fitted with M34 flamethrowers, nicknamed Zippo tanks, capable of throwing burning napalm as far as 80 yards into cave mouths and firing slits. Demolition teams followed with pole charges and satchel charges packed with as much as 40 pounds of explosive, sealing tunnel entrances one at a time rather than clearing them with rifles alone. It was slow, grinding work. Some stretches of ground on Suribachi's northern face changed hands more than once as Japanese defenders emerged from side tunnels behind lines already marked clear. Navy corpsmen worked through all of it unarmed, treating wounded men in the open under the same fire that had cut those men down. On Iwo Jima, corpsmen suffered casualty rates higher than almost any other specialty in the Marine Corps. What became clear to the Marines of the 28th Regiment by nightfall on February 19th was that Suribachi could not be taken by frontal assault alone. It would have to be strangled position by position, pillbox by pillbox, exactly the way Stein had spent the day proving was possible. Divisional commanders began adjusting tactics for the following days, relying more heavily on flame-throwing tanks and demolition teams to seal cave entrances rather than sending riflemen directly at fortified positions. Stein's single-handed elimination of 20 defenders became something other Marines in his company began to talk about even before the battle for the mountain was finished, and his commanding officers started the paperwork for the nation's highest award for valor almost immediately. Stein continued fighting through the following days as the 28th Marines pressed their assault on Suribachi itself. On February 23rd, 4 days after the landing, a 40-man patrol from the 28th Marines reached the summit of the 454-foot volcano and raised a small American flag, an event photographed and later that same morning restaged with a larger flag for the photograph that became the most reproduced image of the entire war. Tony Stein was not on the mountain that day. He had been wounded in the fighting for Suribachi and evacuated to a hospital ship offshore, His part of the battle for the mountain finished before the flag went up. Any man who had already done what Stein had done on February 19th would have had every reason to stay aboard that ship and let his war end there. Instead, when Stein learned that his regiment was taking heavy casualties fighting for a fortified ridge north of the mountain known as Hill 362, he left the hospital ship and returned to his unit. On March 1st, 1945, 10 days after his actions on the invasion beach, Corporal Tony Stein was leading a 19-man patrol against a Japanese machine gun position when a sniper's round killed him. He did not live to learn that he would receive the Medal of Honor. The island itself was declared secure on March 26, 1945, after 36 days of fighting that cost the United States roughly 6,800 Marines and sailors killed and more than 19,000 wounded, making it one of the costliest battles in Marine Corps history relative to the number of men engaged. Of the 21,000 Japanese defenders under General Kuribayashi, fewer than 200 survived to be taken prisoner. Nearly the entire garrison died defending the tunnels they had spent months digging. 27 Medal of Honor recipients came out of the battle for Iwo Jima, more than any single engagement in American military history, and Tony Stein was one of them, the only one whose citation credits a weapon he had helped build with his own hands. The argument over whether the island was worth that price began almost immediately and has never fully settled. In the 5 months that followed, roughly 2,251 B-29 superfortresses landed on Iwo Jima's rebuilt airfields, and for decades, the figure most often quoted held that those landings saved close to 25,000 American airmen. Later, historians found that many of those landings were for fuel top-offs and minor repairs rather than genuine emergencies, and that most crews who ditched at sea in the Pacific were in fact recovered by Navy rescue units. What is not disputed is that on March 4, 1945, just 2 weeks after the landing, a damaged B-29 named Dynamite became the first superfortress to make an emergency landing on Iwo Jima's Airfield No. 1, touching down on a runway Navy Seabees had only just finished repairing under fire. Back in Dayton, Ohio, Stein's death reached a community that had already sent thousands of its sons to war through the same Patterson Field machine shops where he had trained as a toolmaker. Stein was the son of German-speaking Jewish immigrants who had come from Yugoslavia carrying Austrian papers, fleeing the anti-Semitism spreading through Central Europe. He was initially buried in the 5th Marine Division Cemetery on Iwo Jima. His remains were not brought home until 1948, when he was reinterred at Calvary Cemetery in Dayton, the city's only World War II Medal of Honor recipient. Today, a bridge over the Miami River in Old North Dayton carries his name, and an American Legion post on Webster Street does the same. 1 year to the day after he stood up on that beach and drew enemy fire toward himself, on February 19, 1946, Tony Stein's widow stood in the office of Ohio Governor Frank Lauscher in Columbus to accept the Medal of Honor on her husband's behalf. The citation, signed by President Harry S. Truman, described a corporal who charged enemy pillboxes one by one and killed 20 of the enemy in a furious, single-handed assault, whose weapon was twice shot from his hands, and who personally covered his platoon's withdrawal at the end of that first, terrible day. All 6 of the original Stinger machine guns built by Sergeant Grevich's team have since been lost to history. Not one is known to survive in any museum or private collection today. What remains is a Medal of Honor citation, a black-and-white photograph of a young man from Dayton posing before the invasion with a standard machine gun he would trade for something homemade, and 8 round trips across an open beach that a 23-year-old tool and die maker made without being ordered to make even one of them.